funny, I've been going here for 6 months. I didn't know till this morning that there's another classroom in there just off that bride's suite. So that's where the disciples meet. Well, the disciples' Sunday school class. We're all disciples. So I had, I had been thinking after last week, we talked about intercultural differences, and we grow when we get to know people who are different from us. I'm sure that was not a new idea for you. And I have this wonderful PowerPoint display of different images of Jesus from all different countries. And poor Hank and I tried to make it work. We brought in Colt Stubblefield, and if Colt can't make a computer thing work, it's just useless. So I'm just going from the internet. I just Googled multicultural images of Jesus, and I'm going to show them to you now, and I hope that, I haven't censored this, so I hope it's all fine. So above my head, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, you see 12 images of Jesus from different times, different places. In the lower left-hand corner, my money's on, that's El Greco, who was a painter who was Greek, and his name was probably Demetrius Papadopoulos or something, but people called him El Greco, the Greek, and he was famous for those long faces and those mournful eyes. Let's see, up top, we've got second from left, an Asian representation of Jesus, and we're just going to move. We're going to see what we can get here, because I think this is good for us to see these different visual images of Jesus and think about how Christians all over the world imagine their Savior. Let's see. Come on, let's make it big. That's a pretty recent painting of Jesus. Obviously more of an African-looking one. That is a crayon drawing of a heart. Okay, let me go back. So how about this one? We may have some Native American folks in the room. We may have some computer literate people in the room. Well, what happened to our net? Oh, there he is. You were signed out. Well, you got some problems too. Oh, it's Pinterest and you have to log in. Okay, well, look at that. Any of you member of sovereign nations in here? Have Indian blood? We got one, okay. What tribe? Chickasaw. All right. So that's not the representation that I grew up with, certainly. What did Jesus really look like? This was when, I believe it was the National Geographic, went with skeletal remains and anthropological information of people who lived in the area at the time of Jesus' life. And they came up with this, I want to say it was sometime in the 90s, and said, most likely this is what Jesus looked like. Of course, how do they know? I mean, they didn't have a camera. But no blue eyes and light skin there. I'm trying to find some really good ones. If we can get around Pinterest. Here's I like this artist. This is an Asian artist whose name I cannot remember. Man, I don't know how to use the internet. Okay. It's a Chinese-born artist, James He Chi, I guess, Qi. All the curriculum pieces that I was using in the early 2000s had cheese, artistry, and the faces are very much like this profile with the really colorful. So that's Jesus calming the waters. Anyway, it's anybody here art historian or museum docent type? Do any of you just like to look at art?
Yes.
I bet you do. I think that's heck, okay. The Jesus of the people, if you can see that guy. What's a different looking Jesus than the one most of us grew up with? What would you do if that person walked in here and said, I'm Jesus? Yeah.
Not because of what he looks like, but because he was here.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. The first things first. Have you seen that bumper sticker that says, Jesus is coming, look busy? Yeah, we could do a whole Sunday school lesson on that. There's this kind of Alaskan Aleutian person. As soon as I click on something, it goes away. What's the deal with this? Okay, well, there's Jesus the Good Shepherd, looking more like an African setting. Jesus looking like Eric Clapton.
Second one.
Kind of just hanging out with some lambs.
No, Dylan came in this morning. Mine had to rewire some things.
This-
We're not got it fixed yet.
Must be a fresco. Jesus with a, is it a goat? Well, anyway, the one I had on my thumb drive was really good, but very athletic Jesus. And Jesus probably was not a fat person. Jesus probably didn't deal with dealing with the extra 10 pounds after Christmas. So here's a cross from El Salvador. I bet a lot of you have one of these in your home from a mission trip or maybe in an art store or something like that. I collect nativity scenes, and I love it when it's nativity scenes from South America or Asia or any place else, Africa. And the one thing I forgot today was my Bolivian nativity scene, but it's a fabric thing, it's a little wreath, and it has just Mom, Dad, and Jesus. But they have the altiplano hats on, the ear flap hats, and they're all bundled up, and of course use brown fabric to indicate the face. So I like to pull those out at Christmas because I think, let's remind ourselves that Christmas is bigger than Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Christ is bigger than Tulsa, Oklahoma. And other people in other parts of the world think of Jesus differently. So the climax to the end of my PowerPoint display was going to be a picture of Private Tsuyamoto, Sabotage, who was in the Army Specialized Training with my dad. And anyway, I found a picture of them and I'll just email it to you. But he was right. My father was 6 feet tall, and here's Tsuyamoto, probably came up to my dad's sternum almost, but little tiny guy. And the guy on his left was named Rubenstein or something. So that Alabama boy was having a real multicultural experience when he went off to the Army, which I bet a lot of people do, whether you're ready for it or not. Okay. So I have some tangible places we can look to learn more about how to get along with different kinds of people and how to bring peace to the world and how to be a better person in your little area. Because none of us single-handedly can control the outside world as much as we would like to. None of us can fix war single-handedly. None of us can fix racism single-handedly. But we can change our attitudes sometimes. Let's start with a local one. The OCCJ, the Oklahoma Conference for Community and Justice. And some of you are going, yeah, hold my coffee. Because maybe you volunteer there or you've been through their trainings or something. This used to be the NCCJ, the National Conference of Christians and Jews. And then Oklahoma's branch decided to differentiate themselves and split off from the NCCJ. And they said, we're going to call ourselves OCCJ because we're doing our own thing and we're going to fund ourselves. I don't really know what the dust up was there. But after a while they realized, well, if we call ourselves the Oklahoma Conference of Christians and Jews, we're leaving out the Muslims and the Buddhists and the Hindus and stuff. So now it's Oklahoma Conference of Community and Justice. And I got to know all about this because of Trey Biggs' father, Muzon Biggs, who was my boss, my pastor and then my boss for so long. He was really involved in the OCCJ and was the president, I think maybe more than once, of the president of the board there. They do all kinds of trainings for people more this size and like this is, teenagers are our height, but anyway, medium-sized adults, almost adults. You've probably heard of Camp Anytown. And you can send your teenage child to Camp Anytown, and I don't know what campsite they're using now, but you go and you learn how to have civil dialogue. You learn how to deal with disagreements. You learn how to be respectful of people from other religions and stuff like that. So, how great is this? Every kid ought to be mandated to attend this place, and the whole town, we ought to fund the whole town to go, breaking down barriers and healing misunderstandings. I'm on staff here now, so I've got to check my phone. Oh, we look forward to seeing you for your chiropractic appointment tomorrow at 9:25, 24 hours from now. Great. So that's one of the things they do. They also train adult professionals like yourselves in something called the ILI, which is the Learning Institute. I think it's Interfaith Learning Institute, but you professional people out there working, how do you deal with all the different types of people in your cubicle? And it's a basic diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And I've been a part of that. I was a part of the 2017 cohort or group graduating class. And that's where I learned what equity is. We know what diversity is, right? Different types of people all mixed in together. Inclusion. Have you ever had a birthday party before? And then your mom said, don't forget to invite that other little person. Don't forget to invite the new kid in your class. So you invite him. You're practicing inclusion. But then equity. What is equity? Equality we get. Equality is you and I are the same, or we get paid the same, or we get the same number of days off or something. But equity, I learned at the ILI, is everybody getting what he or she needs to accomplish the same thing. And the image that I have that our teacher gave us was this. If you, okay, this is me. A little short haircut. That's me. Never leave the house without my earrings on. Okay, I'm real tall. So here's me. Here's my friend. Very short legs. And then here's our friend who's this size. So we all want to go watch the local baseball team practice, but there's this fence there. So I can barely see over it. If I go like this, I can see the baseball game, but what about him? Well, equality would be if we decide, okay, we're gonna lower the fence to this height. So that's one way to try to improve the situation. But equity would be this. Equity is recognizing the individual needs of each person and gearing your solution to what they need. So that's a simplification, but that's how I define equity. And that is how I draw people. Actually, I'm a lot better than that usually, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to do a 3D sculpture of people. So other places you could look. Okay, there's a place called tolerance.org. And that's a good one. Has anyone ever decided, hey, I'd like to see how many white supremacist organizations we have in the area? Usually when you're going to your computer, you're saying, does Los Cabos deliver? Or other things like that. Or is the church open today? But you may have heard of this place. Don't? I'm doing this right. It's really long. Southern Poverty. Oh, it's SPL Center. That's right. Don't look this up until after you've had your roast and your carrots. Because some of the stuff you read here will smell as bad as that onion until you find it behind your counter. I don't know what it went behind, but I think you probably ought to look for it soon.
That was at the grocery store.
Oh, okay.
Behind something.
That's their problem. I just thought, if you have an onion that's down behind your oven or something, you're gonna know after a while. This place does a whole bunch of really good work on racism, fighting racism. But it also keeps a running list of white supremacist organizations. There's a lot of that kind of activity in Oklahoma. I didn't realize that until probably 2013 when someone from this organization came to my church in Norman and gave a presentation. And I was so totally grossed out, and it lit a fire inside of me to, I don't know, I haven't fixed the problem single-handedly yet, but it lit a fire inside of me to become aware and say, okay, the plan is alive and well, and we got to be aware of it. So it's still a problem. Here's one called the Peace Education Center, peaceed.org. So anyway, wonderful resources. If you ever are called upon to do a devotional about world peace, or if you have a small group that's studying being a Christian and fighting the ills of the world, or if you want to look at statistics for who's impoverished and who has rights and who doesn't have rights and all that kind of stuff. So those are some good places to look. And here are some things I'm not going to write on board, but tell you about it. When I was working at Holland Hall, I was sorely unequipped classroom teacher all of a sudden and was trying to teach these kids how to be better people. And one of the things I read was a teaching thing you could do with kids. I didn't make you do that today because I didn't want to bring a bucket of lemons today, but imagine I had handed each of you a lemon, and your first thing you needed to do was peel the lemon. So you're probably sitting here smelling a peeled lemon. Now I have this great big galvanized metal tub, and I want everyone to put his or her lemon in here. Okay, then I'm going to walk to the back where Hank is, and I'm going to say, Mr. Haynes, would you come back here and select your lemon that you put in here? Okay, so why wouldn't you be able to find your lemon? They all look alike, yeah. So punchline, underneath the peel, we all look the same. Underneath the skin, we're all the same. So that's a good lesson for kids, certainly, to learn. Then I don't know what you do with the rest of the 30 minutes in that class. And with all those lemons that all those little hands have touched. Okay. The goal of social justice education is full and equal participation of all groups in a society that is mutually shaped to meet their needs. This is what we would love to have in our world. If we had a society where everyone could get access to what they need. If you need a ramp, there's a ramp. If you need deaf translation, there's deaf interpretation. If you need extra time to complete your test at school, you get that. And universities are certainly working on that. And if you have any kind of disability, most schools now you can say, I have dyslexia, or I have a visual problem, or whatever, and then you have accommodations, which is great. Not so much in the workplace. And skip it over. Okay, how about 6 elements of social justice curriculum for K through 12 education? And I would say K through 105. Here are 6 things that we need to use as we move forward into a world that is racially on fire and all messed up in some ways. The first step is self-love and self-knowledge. How many of you were raised to love yourself? Kathy and I weren't. We weren't raised to hate ourselves necessarily, but we were raised to love others and respect others and think of yourself last. And, you know, Jesus thought of himself last and so on. But now from a mental health perspective, we have to feel good about ourselves, or else we will not feel good about others. Most angry, yucky, gross people who wind up on the Southern Poverty Law Center's lists of people to watch out for don't love themselves. They hate themselves, and they hate the world. So if you have that problem, which you probably don't, because otherwise you wouldn't be here for church today, I bet. So start with love of yourself. And then respect of others. And I bet we were all taught that. Look the man in the eye when he's talking to you, boy. Maybe you were raised that way too. The lady speaking to you, when you meet someone, you shake hands. And when someone else talks, you listen and you wait your turn. So respect of others. Educate yourself on issues of social injustice. Learn about social movements and social change. So many things we can be a part of that are very good things that begin with a small step. I keep going back to the Iron Gate ministry that this class is so involved in. And I want to know about the other stuff that you do in addition to that. I bet this class, if you made a list for me of all the places where you volunteer during the week, I realize that you've got your tentacles into all kinds of stuff in this town, and people depend on you. do your part for raising awareness, and then get involved in social action. You can write letters, you can sign petitions, you can speak at public meetings, and you can organize protests. So you're all sweating thinking, oh no, she's gonna make us go participate in a protest. No, I don't want you to participate in anything today because it's too icy. Don't have a protest until about 12:15 when the temperature gets high enough that all this stuff melts. Kathy and I went separately to the symphony last night, and both of us assumed that the parking garage at the PAC took credit cards, because it seems like they always did. Neither of us had any cash, or maybe enough. I don't know what Kathy had, but I had 0 cash. And I had timed it just right. I'm going to get in there, I'm going to park, I'm going to, and then I'll be in my seat. And so I got in there and I said, do you take plastic? And the man said, no. So I had to go out and park on 2nd between D&E, Detroit and Elgin, and walk to the PAC like this, because those sidewalks were an ice rink. So I figured maybe nobody would show up today, and I would have been fine with that. But dadgummit, you showed up. I'm glad to see it, but I did worry for everybody getting out of the car, including me today, because nothing was going to melt. So don't go organize a protest until at least 12:15 today, because you don't need to fall and break something in the midst of your protest. So you also, many of you, have in your hands, you either have a way that we can perpetuate bad attitudes, or a way that we can foster good attitudes. So let's start with the bad attitudes. Some of you have a schizo problem because I gave you one of each. So if you have a yellow strip, those are the things you can do to promote a bad attitude. So who would read off for us something off the yellow strip? Okay.
Don't challenge racial jokes and comments.
Don't challenge racial jokes and comments. What's another one?
Assume my point of view is the norm.
Assume your point of view is the norm. Okay, what's another?
Avoid events of ethnic groups other than my own.
Avoid events of ethnic groups other than your own. Okay, what's another one?
Ignore the literature, achievement of people, racial ethnic groups other than your own. And I wondered why you gave Jen and I, yeah.
Just kidding.
He's got a white one in there too. Okay, ignore the accomplishments in literature of ethnicities other than your own. Okay, Kathy?
Think that racism is not a problem.
Think that racism is not a problem. No joke, Kathy and I heard someone say sometime in the last year, somewhere in some town in this nation, racism is over. This person said, racism is over. I was down on Greenwood and everybody was nice to me. Okay, so assume that racism is not a problem. Are there any more yellow ones out there? Okay, so what are the good things that we can do? That's on your white strips. And I had 2 colors of paper. Actually, I had white paper coming out my ears, and I had some manila envelopes at home. So I cut the back off of the manila envelope. So I don't want you to think that like white is better and yellow is bad. So who has a positive thing we can do in the world?
Educate myself about people's differences.
Educate yourself about people's differences.
Use my access to people with influence to serve as an advocate for people of color and eliminate racism.
Okay, use your power and your access to people in places of privilege. Okay, Mr. Haynes.
Listen to and don't discount the discrimination experience of others.
Oh, don't discount the discrimination experience of others. Yeah, and that goes for pastoral care too. When you say, you're lying in the hospital, well, I broke my leg in 3 places. Well, that's nothing. I broke my leg in 18 places. Or, well, you should try being a war veteran. Well, you know what? I don't really care about that right now because I have pins in my hip and I can't go to the bathroom by myself. So don't say, oh, well, you had to sit in the back of the room. Well, I had no access to running water. We don't want to play that. Or say that person that we encountered, racism is over, and then maybe a person of color would have said to him or her, well, yeah, but my grandfather's house was burned down in the race massacre. Oh, that's ancient history. Blah. Okay. Sorry, editorial comments. Who's got another positive idea? Kathy?
Seek to befriend and understand people from racial, ethnic groups other than my own.
Yeah, make some new friends. Okay, got another one? Carrie?
Challenge racial slurs and jokes that put down other groups.
Challenge racial slurs and jokes. Boy, that's hard, isn't it? Sometimes. Yeah.
Make opportunities to interact with people of a variety of races and backgrounds.
Okay. Make opportunities to interact with people of a variety of races and backgrounds. Was that it, or is there another one? Well, you folks had some great ideas. You didn't need to talk about this at all. I was doing something else the night that this church hosted a dinner for the Afghan refugees. Did any of you go to that? Okay, what was that like?
It was very nice, and people mixed around.
Good.
A couple of them sitting at our table, and they tried very diligently to speak what little English they knew.
So hard. Well, good.
There was one at my table that was a medical doctor, and so he was going to try to get licensed, through the OSU Medical Center, so he could be a medical person in that community. Fascinating.
Meredith had a medical doctor at her table who was going to try to go through the licensure process. I would not even begin to imagine how complicated that all is, especially when you don't speak English. But as most of us know who have been to the doctor in the last, 20 years, there are a lot of people with different accents than our own when we go to the doctor. Somehow we make it through okay.
Amy, let me add a comment. I was at that dinner, and about a third were her veteran members, a third were the Afghans, and a third were police in the class, the training class, and so forth. The purpose of it was to introduce police to the Afghans and show Afghans are here to help and not be scared of it.
Oh, good.
But what we learned real quick was there was a major language barrier. And so here are a bunch of people in Tulsa that don't know how to communicate. And they just perceive a fact based on visual. And that's, if I were them, I would be very afraid of that. And then I got to thinking, what can we do to make them more comfortable if visual is all they have?
Yeah.
Or how do I learn Afghan? I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, is that, I was just thinking, what do they speak in Afghanistan? Farsi? Or do they speak something called Afghan?
There's several different dialects.
Are there?
Have they started classes for them so they can start learning English somewhere? They have volunteers who have English as a second language that are teaching. Good.
So you felt that they might, I just didn't understand, they might be afraid of the police officers in uniform and all that, or they were afraid of people in his class?
I think they were very leery of they would do something wrong.
Oh.
To offend us, or to offend our society, or our culture, or whatnot, because they were uneducated, they were inexperienced, and they couldn't understand, they couldn't hear. We couldn't. So we have to communicate with our eyes, with our body language, and so forth, to let them know that they're accepted, they're welcome, and it's nice to have them here. And that's a challenge. That's different than what we normally do.
That is very challenging. And I think English is such a hard language. I think we're lucky if we learned it from our mothers and dads. But think of all of the colloquial expressions that we use, like, oh, I let the cat out of the bag today, or I'll be there in 2 shakes of a dead lamb's tail. Somebody just learning the language would be like, what? You're gonna get a dead lamb and shake the tail and then come get in the car? I don't know. Now that I've mentioned that, I can't think of any other expressions. But it's hard to speak for 5 minutes without peppering what you're saying with a lot of those expressions.
I'll tell you, I had a customer that was telling me that she was speaking to somebody from, and I can't remember what country it was, but she said she was amazed at how often we use the word love. I love Pepsi. And she said, in her language, you only love people.
That is very interesting. And we all know we have different levels of love. Like I love Pepsi, and then I love my child. That's not the same thing, is it? I hope your child comes before Pepsi. I don't know, maybe your kid has just run you nuts.
How often she heard that.
Yes, that's true. Well, that makes me think about just the Eskimos. I guess that's the Inuit language or the Aleutian language or something, where they have, 400 different words for snow? Because there are all these different types of snow. And for us, it's just, any snow is snow. Then we call it powdery snow, or light snow, or icy snow, or beautiful snow, or annoying snow. Yeah. So, yeah, that would be hard to get used to. Man, these people's priorities are pretty weird if they feel the same way about their husband as they do Pepsi or Hershey's Kisses. So I remember being in about 7th grade, and my mom and her first cousin and her husband invited us to go. Well, they lived in Pawnee. I'm trying to think what lake that would have been. Maybe it was Grand Lake. Out on their pontoon boat. And I'd never been on a pontoon boat before, but got to ride around on the boat and put on life jackets and go swimming. And her cousin Doris was just the life of the party anywhere she went. Doris Waltzberger. Anybody know the Waltzbergers? Her baby boy turned up to be a dentist, and he has a practice in Ulaga. So I spoke at the church in Ulaga one time, and I said, I'm a second cousin of Joe Frank Multicultural. And they went, oh. So here that gives me no street credit. But anyway, I always thought Multicultural, that sounds like a really good Saturday lunch, burger and a malt. But anyway, old German name, I guess. So we were out on that pontoon boat, and they had a sound system, and they were playing all of Doris's favorite music, and here came a Willie Nelson song, and she said, oh, Willie Nelson, I love him, he is my love man. And I thought, what does Frank think about that? You're saying you love Willie Nelson? Well, she probably wasn't going to run off with Willie Nelson. Again, what if he walked in, maybe she would have. But don't you love Frank more than you love Willie Nelson? Well, of course she did. He was the love of her life. But she loved Willie Nelson's music, and she, loved his hair, whatever. Loved the fact that he got out of Nashville and created the Texas sound. By God. So I think that dinner that you all had was one of the greatest social justice events you could have done during a pandemic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at this church. It'd be great to keep that kind of thing going, and I'm sure Kevin and others want you to have an ongoing relationship with some of those refugees. I can't imagine being in that place. I can't imagine having to flee my country and being, how your body feels when someone has just died, and you just feel like, I can't sleep, I can't eat, I just almost want to throw up. Everything is just, and your nerves are just shot. So I would imagine at the time of that dinner, they were still feeling that way, like, I'm just trying to get through the next hour. And I bet it took a lot of guts for them to show up at this thing. I mean, sure, yay, free food, whatever, but they had to show up, and maybe it was a trap. Maybe you were some evil kind of people and you were going to get them all arrested by the police for one thing or another. But obviously you didn't, and that's not what you were going to do. So I think that kind of love, I think that is what they call radical hospitality. That's the best example of radical hospitality that I've seen in a long time. They probably are not going to want to come to church here because they're probably not Christians, I assume.
To Buzz Daniel, to his leadership in Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, made that possible.
To Buzz McDaniel for the leadership in TMN, Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry. Absolutely. It takes one person to start the phone calls, doesn't it? It's a good idea, but then somebody has to actually call and email people and go buy the styrofoam plates and all that stuff. Oh, I had something else I was going to say. Afghans, stress. I don't know. I have no idea. I'll think of it later this afternoon. Well, I think I'll wrap up. I'll dismiss class 5 minutes early because you've been so attentive and you dealt with another week of long strips of paper. And you didn't have to do anything too hard. Plus, I guess I'm supposed to stand out there and greet people and give the deacons a hard time. Say, get in line, get your offering plates and all that stuff. So thank you for having me again. I'll be around, and I'm going to try to be learning everybody's names. This stuff makes it harder, but I'm a big proponent of the masks. I think it's a really scary time with this disease. And the chart, did you see the chart of zip codes this week in the Tulsa area of who's most affected? The dark red means, oh, there are a lot of infections in your zip code. It's just dark red. Looks like somebody slaughtered something. On top of it, it's dark red. The only zip code that is white, meaning no infections, is 74117. Does anybody live in that zip code? Okay, of course you don't, because that's where the zoo and Mohawk Park are. And apparently there, according to the census, this is what you get when you don't have anything going on, you just read the stuff on the internet. There are 80 residents in 74117. So, 80 human residents. There's orangutans and baboons and giraffes and all those kinds of people, but we're not as worried about them with COVID as we are ourselves. So, shall I close? Yes?
I wish you would mention the open table. You haven't mentioned that at all.
That's a wonderful thing going on.
And I guess Boston Avenue initiated that.
I think so, with the help of others. He's talking about open tables, which is I think it's quarterly, Sunday evening dinner. It's potluck, and anybody can come who wants to. You can come if you don't bring food, but you're encouraged to bring something to add to the tables, which are always groaning with food. There's always way too much. But Vicki Langston is one of the ones that's really key in that. She's another minister's spouse from way back. She's one of the ones who had to move every 2 years when Guy was transferred, I think, to the Methodist Church. So she got together with some people from the Raindrop Turkish House here in Tulsa. Write that down. That is, I think it's on 71st. Right when you enter Broken Arrow. And that's a house of interfaith welcome.
I think it's at 81st.
Is it? Probably. I get south of 41st and forget where I am, so. 81st.
Jewish.
Yes, Hindus, Jewish folks, Christian folks, non-participating folks. I've been a couple of times, and there's usually a speaker, and guided discussion questions at your table, and sort of like you said in the back, you're encouraged to mix. And it seems like the time I went, we had assigned seats, or you came in and you got a certain colored slip of paper or something. So it wasn't just all your friends from church and then this table of Muslims over here. But yeah, sitting with Muslim people and talking about Tulsa Public Schools and stuff like that, and having what we would call leveling mechanisms in anthropology, questions that are common to everyone's experience, and questions that have to deal with what the person presented who was there. So it's a traveling place. Yes, so I think you can just Google open tables. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Tammy has been involved in Jody, the Zingers,
Okay. It's a great way, the strips that we read off, find friends of other ethnic groups. It's not always easy to do. If you don't have any at work, you don't have any in your neighborhood, you don't run into people. It's weird to just go up to people at the grocery store and say, "Hi, I'm Amy. Would you like to come over to my house for dinner?" So this would be a great place to form relationships with people who are different from you. Even just people who are a lot younger than you or a lot older than you. So, well, I was going to include it anyway. Yes, sir.
So there's a little different take. There's a group that first read, it's called Tulsa International Fellowship.
Okay.
And it was built around a young minister who came to Latin. And the church sponsored him to Phillips, helped him get his naturalization. And what has grown is a group of around 100 Africans, not all from one country, but they have become a power among themselves. And gradually, they've integrated themselves in the church. At first, they wanted them to do what the rest of us, and probably some of us didn't want to do it. And now the kids are all huddled together in the Sunday school classes and children's activities. And it's been an amazing thing to watch over the period of 19 years. So it's an example, and by the way, all of the Africans don't agree. We think as one group, yet how many countries in that story?
Yeah, very different.
They have a lot of differences among themselves that would fit very well in this schematic that we created here.
And what a gift to those children of those African people who've moved here and, oh my gosh, I've got to make friends. Well, you immediately have your church friends. And that helps you with your friends at school too. So thanks for those wonderful local examples. And those things would be really easy to get involved in. Anything that just says, come bring food and eat, I'm gonna do that. Bring a bag of tortilla chips if you don't go and buy meat, make a roast and throw onions around and stuff, but that's not really your jam.
Yeah, what's time for lunch?
Yeah. She did not say it was an open table, so. Well, why don't I close this with a prayer? Holy God, we give you great thanks for this brave group who made it here today, and we give you thanks for what they are already involved in. And we ask that you bless each one of us and make us ambassadors for Christ as we go through our daily lives, as ordinary as they seem, but keep us ever mindful of the people who are not included, who are lost and lonely, who need a little step up, and if we can give it, make us willing to do so. We pray for those traveling today, and we also pray for these COVID numbers that are so high, that keep us all vigilant, and we pray for healing for those who need it. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right. Thank you. That's all.